He will pull you out of your darkness to a place to let your light shine that will give Him glory. Helen and her husband, David Smallbone, were raising their 6 children in Australia when a devastating business setback wiped out their family's livelihood. With a new baby on the way, they realized that God was opening doors around the globe in Nashville, Tennessee. 3 decades later, the Smallbone family has inspired millions of people with their radical faith in the Grammy-winning music talents of Rebecca St. James and for King and Country, Joel and Luke Smallbone. Today, Helen shares a behind-the-scenes view of their family life in her new book, Behind the Lights, The Extraordinary Adventure of a Mom and Her Family. This is her story. This is today's Nashville. This is faith. Helen, what a blessing and honor it is to be invited to your farm and it's an amazing, beautiful place. And we're in your studio here. And tell me about this room.
Well, this room, when we first moved in here, was actually the farmer who built this property. It's an older property. He used it as his workroom. So it had his saws, etc. in it. Then we converted it into a sort of a distribution office house. It's had, I don't know where it went after that, and then it's in the last few years it was actually the beginnings of For King Country's first offices, low rent, always important to keep the expenses down, and lately it's just sits here and is a storage room, really.
Well, you know, a lot of people don't know that you are the mother of amazing music talent that has reached the world, Rebecca St. James for King and Country, but it all started in Australia.
It did all start in Australia, yes.
Let's go back.
Well, I married my husband fairly young. He was very marketing management oriented. He worked in secular music and realised that he did not wish to market and promote people who had nothing to offer. And it really disturbed him that you see these stars off stage, and he said there was just emptiness. So he decided he wanted to get into Christian music. So the first concert that we ever attended as a family was when Rebecca was 6 weeks old, and it was a Larry Norman concert in the Sydney Opera House. And he then proceeded over the next about 15 years, bringing a lot of the major Christian artists. It was the beginning of Christian music in America, and we would bring them down to Australia. He also had a small record company. At one point, he had the gamut. He had a music magazine, he had a Christian bookstore, he had a record company, a distribution company, and concert production and management. So obviously he grew so fast you've got to remember Australia has about the same landmass as the central area of America. However, you might have 300 million or so, maybe even more than that now, where we have about 30 million. And in those days it would have even been less than that. So and Australians sort of more post-Christian, and so we don't have very many active, probably 5% of that population would be active Christians. So you've really got a very small marketplace, and by the time he was getting close to 40, he was realising, I don't know if I can keep doing this for the rest of my life, because I'm only as good as my last tour, I'm only as good as my last, marketing opportunity. So it was stressful, but we grew up around all the major artists. It was pretty grand.
Well, tell me a little bit about your faith and David's faith. When did you become believers and followers of Jesus?
We both grew up in very similar homes. I'm actually a pastor's kid, and I'm the youngest of 3 brothers. David's family, his father was a lay preacher, which is sort of a step down from being a pastor. We both moved a lot. We actually had the same families. He's 3 boys and a girl. I'm 3 boys and a girl, both the oldest are David's. I mean, the similarities are just staggering. We married when I was fairly young. I was 20. Started having kids at 22. Ended up with 6 kids. Our faith journey really, mine mid-teens, I really committed my life and took Jesus seriously. My dad had a bit of a revival in his ministry at about that time, and we really went deeper in our faith. It was And we carried that into marriage. Part of David's wasn't as serious about his faith, but God has that way of making you go deeper.
So from Australia, how did you get to Nashville?
We had 3 major doors closed. We actually, on a tour, lost $250,000, which we knew we were not going to trade out of. That was close.
Was this back in Australia?
Back in Australia, close to David's 40th birthday. There were 2 other opportunities that he thought that he might be able to continue in Australia. He actually started recording music at Hills CLC, which then ended up becoming Hillsong Music. He was the originator of that. The Hills Church took it back. That door closed, and then he had another opportunity to come to America with Carmen. He actually bought our tickets to come over to America, and then Carmen pulled out. So we were left with our tickets, but no job. So he came over here mid-1991 and found an artist that he was going to manage, and that was what led us over here.
So I have read when you got here, it was very, very difficult. You had your 6 kids.
I was pregnant with number 7.
Number 7.
No health insurance. We didn't have that little nest egg to rely on. No family, minimal friends, some work acquaintances from David's work in Christian music. And so we moved into a rental house in Brentwood in Nashville, and we had no furniture. The kids were sleeping on beds made out of clothes. And we really just treated it as a bit of an adventure.
Were there any times, though, you wondered what God was doing?
I think when David lost his job a couple of months after we were here, we were very much like, okay, this is pretty dramatic. And then we were like, what on earth is God doing? He leads us here and then you lose your job. But in those early days, when you've got nothing to go back to, you've got to go forward. And you go forward one step at a time. And so we gathered around as a family and we prayed. And we saw God answering those prayers and providing us with miracles. We got a house full of furniture. A local Sunday school at Baptist Church provided us with all our furniture in their house. They continued to support us. We started working together as a family. We were doing raking leaves. We were given a lawnmower the following summer and we would mow lawns. Rebecca started cleaning, babysitting, and it was really the kids working that actually put food on the table. And David picked up another job in management, and that paid our basic bills, but it was still pretty hand to mouth.
That is amazing. And it's interesting how God started turning your life around.
Very slowly, step by step, and whenever we were discouraged, something that would happen that would just say, just keep going, keep going. And Rebecca, we arrived in August 1991, and Rebecca got signed, I believe, in 1993, and her first album, which was called Rebecca St. James, came out in 1994.
How old was she then?
16.
16, very young. Helen, we're going to talk about that when we come back, how God turned your whole life around.